A lot to talk about here. Joining us now to discuss is Betsy McCaughey, former Lieutenant Governor of New York and a Trump supporter as well, I should mention. Also with us is former Obama administration official and CNN senior political commentator Van Jones. All right, look, we got the debate in a few days here at this point. The big question, Van, I'll start with you, is what does President Biden need to do on Thursday?
Well, I mean, he's going up against a force of nature. He's going up against a grizzly bear, a hurricane, and a freight train at the same time. So just being able to stand his ground and deliver is a big part of it. You couldn't do it, I couldn't do it, nobody here could do it. Donald Trump is a force of nature. So just to stand toe-to-toe with this guy for an hour and a half or however long it is and give as good as he gets is a win. Trump has to knock him out. I mean, Trump has got to do extraordinarily well because everybody expects him to. Nobody expects Biden to, so it's really Trump's to mess up from my point of view.
And Betsy, I'll ask you the same question. I mean, what does the former president need to do? What are you looking for from him at this CNN debate?
Well, I want to compliment Van first because he wrote a terrific piece 2 days ago emphasizing what high stakes this debate is. And it probably is one of the most high stakes debate in presidential history. I think to make this a fair debate, two things need to be done. I would suggest that the moderators ask both candidates the same questions. They're both incumbents with records to defend. And secondly, I would call on Judge Merchan to lift the gag order so when the topic does turn to President Trump's conviction, he is free to explain why he believes that conviction is unjust, including his views of the judge and of the testimony at the trial, because otherwise it's not just that his rights are being deprived, that he's losing his First Amendment rights, but the voters are losing their right to hear from the candidate fully. And if it's a close election and Trump loses by a sliver and then his conviction is overturned, voters aren't going to get a second chance to go to the polls.
And I will say, you know, this is happening right before Trump's sentencing, which is scheduled to happen in July. And he can still talk about the Justice Department at large and about the judge, but it's specific people as well. But as you point out, it'll be interesting to see how he threads that line. Van, a big part of Democrats' strategy this November, we have seen and likely will see, will focus on abortion. And many activists believe that painting Trump as the reason why Roe v. Wade was overturned, which the anniversary is in just a few days here and just ahead of the debate, is going to be key. And Trump today at a rally commented on just that. Take a listen real quick.
I want to thank the 6 Supreme Court justices. Thanks to these justices, we have also achieved what the pro-life movement fought to get for 49 years, and we've gotten abortion out of the federal government. Getting it back to the states puts the question where it belongs with the vote of the people, and over time, it will all work out. It's working out right now.
So I guess, Van, the question is, do you expect abortion politically to hold the same weight that it did in the immediate aftermath of when Dobbs was struck down?
It definitely will, and I'm happy to see Donald Trump just hugging that cactus. You keep hugging that cactus, brother. That is the one issue that the American people have been increasingly appalled by the outcome of this. Abstractly, people are like, oh, yes, I'm against abortion. But then when they hear about, people who are going to die if they can't have this procedure, when they hear about people who've been raped, people who've been, victims of incest, who are being forced to have their rapist kids, they go, well, that's not what I wanted. And so Donald Trump has to hug this cactus. It is the one issue that I think, especially for younger voters, will continue to be a primary motivator.
And Betsy, I'll just ask you on the other side of that. I mean, is it wrong for him to tout overturning abortion? Is he hugging a cactus here?
Well, I don't think he is, and I'm a pro-choice Republican, but I will say this. The New York Times reported just a couple of days ago that Donald Trump's lead among men is widening, but Biden's lead among women is not. It's shrinking, and here's why. As important as abortion rights are to many women, particularly suburban women, they're beginning to notice other things that are very important to them that Donald Trump is more focused on. Of course, inflation. They go to the supermarket and see the price of food, the price of gas. But the other one is crime related to the border. In Latin America, there is a culture of wanton assault, rape, and murder of women. The United Nations has called it femicide and has condemned several Latin American nations for allowing this to occur. Now, it is being transferred across the southern border. You see rape trees and rape tents all the way along from the Northern Triangle and the Latin American countries to the Mexican border. And now, just in the last week, you've seen several gruesome crimes. The rape of an 11-year-old girl walking home from school in Queens. The murder of a 12-year-old girl in Texas, her body found floating down a river. And a woman with 5 children murdered, all by these migrants.
So
Women care about that.
I'll just jump in really quickly. I don't want to take away from the seriousness of those events. Obviously, those are tragedies, and I know what you're talking about with the UN designating that part of the world as having issues with femicide. We also see that issue across the world in various regions. And while these crimes are happening, I don't know that we've seen them happen at a rate higher than U.S. citizens committing crimes at this point. That does not take away from the seriousness of what we're talking about. And Van, I use that framing to pose the question to you, is that obviously immigration and concerns about security at the border are very real for the voting population here. And I just wonder, how do you think Biden has handled this, and do you think this will hurt him politically, how he's handled it so far to this point?
Well, right now, people are concerned about immigration, trust Trump more than they trust Biden, so right now it's hurting him. But the reality is that Biden is doing more and doing more in a balanced way, despite the Republicans refusing to help him now. The Republicans' strategy was to scream fire, as we just heard. This is terrible, it's terrible, all this horrible stuff is happening. And then when it was time to pass the bill, refused to pass the bill, do anything about it, because they like being able to tell these kind of horror stories. And by the way, the vast majority of people who are locked up in this country for rape of American citizens are American citizens. The vast majority. The vast majority of people in this country who are locked up for murder and all these crimes against American citizens are American citizens. And so to paint this, to say there's a culture, there's not a culture. There are some criminal elements who are running roughshod. There's no culture south of the border that celebrates rape. And that's the kind of stuff. I hope Republicans scream that from the rooftops, that the Republican, we got one right here, that thinks that Latinos have some, passion for crimes against women. That is the kind of stuff that actually pushes people toward Democrats and away from that party.
I have to leave it there.
I would refer Van to the report of the United Nations on that topic. The United Nations, hardly a right-wing organization, has pointed to these South American and Central American countries as fostering, tolerating a culture that demonizes and victimizes women and young girls. And of course, more people are locked up in the United States are citizens. But we should not be allowing migrants across the border who have a record of abusing women.
The border. You are insulting people below the border. You're misrepresenting that report. We can come back and talk about it later on if you want to.
I'll leave it there. We will come back to that. We'll have you guys back. We'll talk it out.
Nice
but for
to
now,
join you.
Appreciate your perspectives. As always, Van Jones, Betsy McCaughey, thanks for being here.